Hey everybody, this is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 34 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. He's obsessed with rainy days, he has a new Bengal kitten named Tesla, and he just got his 11th tattoo yesterday. He is the world's toughest hypnotist, Dr. Mike Mandel.
The world's toughest. Bring it on, mofo. I'm ready for you. Listen, Chris, this is it's a good day to be doing a podcast. It is raining, and as you know, I am obsessed with rainy days, probably from being born in April in England. I have rain in my DNA, and a nice overcast day like this on the way to our studio just steps away from the prestigious University of Toronto where Banting and Best synthesized insulin a number of years ago. I was listening to doom metal all the way here today. Not Funeral, but My Dying Bride, a wonderful doom metal band from the UK, which is a terrific break from the likes of Shania Twain.
That is absolutely bizarre to hear you say doom metal.
Yeah, doom metal is very drony and slow, and it creates very powerful kinesthetic states. It's cool stuff. As for the new kitten, yes, Tesla is up and running and growing and gassy and cute and fragrant and attacking his big brother Kashmir. And I just got my 11th tattoo. Yes, I got Raja, my beloved former Bengal's name, tattooed on my wrist. So now we bring completion and closure to that issue.
Right. And what was it you called me and said yesterday? You said that was the most painful tattoo I've ever had.
It was insane. I have, as I said, 10 previous ones from, upper back and my spine and my upper arms and even the around the arm, full upper arm near the armpit where people don't like to go. And even you see bikers and that get cheat ones where they just do the part that shows on the outside. But no, Uncle Mike went right around on both of them because he's an Enneagram 8. And if you can't take it, you shouldn't be getting tattooed. Well, this one was worse. The one on the inside of the wrist, which went over some significant veins and got me thinking about, all sorts of blood poisoning and things like that. Anyway, she assured me it's all right. But it also goes over the little tiny tendons there, which are the marker for a couple of the acupuncture points in Chinese medicine, which is fine. But when one runs a tattoo gun over them, it's like having a dentist drill going into your wrist. And I was sweating buckets yesterday.
Oh, man. That does not sound fun. I still have 0 tattoos and plan to keep it that way. All right. Now, let us get on with the show. We are going to do podcast 34 here. This is the completion of the memory power topic that we started on the last podcast.
Now, the humor, Chris, as you said to me this morning, I had written you a thing on our Gmail folder and said, okay, I've got some ideas for the podcast. And you said, don't you want to complete the one on memory? Or did you forget? And
That's
I went,
right.
I actually did forget that we were doing the memory one, the second part.
And of course, I was just being a joker by using forget and memory together because I think I was the victim of that joke last time.
Well, you're just mocking the fact that I'm getting old, Christopher.
Very
just
old.
2 weeks away from my 60th birthday, a nightmare.
Oh, I thought that was a secret. Last podcast, I think you mentioned.
We'll edit that out.
Yeah, yeah, right.
We've said we'll edit that out so many times, and we've forgotten to. I think we need to edit out the words. We'll edit that out. Just go back over everything.
Yeah, that's true. We should just edit everything out.
That was a nice, weak response.
Yeah. I don't know what am I being congruent? I'm thinking that's a good idea. All right, let's get on with it.
Right.
So we have a couple of things to talk about with memory. It's not going to occupy the entire podcast. We do want to do the mailbag Q&A questions.
Oh, that's always a good one, too. And we are right in the middle of a 5-day Architecture of Hypnosis course at the University of Toronto. And Brennan Hall at St. Michael's College became ground zero, the epicenter of global hypnosis. And we drew in our 25 students from around the world. We had 2 from California. One drove all the way from San Francisco. It took him 5 days. One from Minneapolis. One from Holland. And the rest are from various parts of Canada. We're halfway through the course, actually 40% of the way through. And we are having an absolute blast. So if any of the students hear this later, remember what a great time you had. And we appreciate you coming out and studying with us.
Yep, we are recording this literally... Can I say that? Literally
it's all the cough syrup.
It's the bulletproof coffee. 2 days after the first weekend ended. So, yeah, it was fantastic, and we're looking forward to finishing up the course on Friday. Anyway, not a commercial on Hypnosis course, but if you're interested in the next one, July 8th to 12th here in Toronto, it's a 5-day intensive.
And the bookings are coming in now, and this is a Monday to Friday course. Please check out the website and come and study Architecture of Hypnosis in July.
Yep, and then I will quickly remind you as well to put September 7th, which is a Saturday, in your calendar for the handwriting analysis course. Email us, info@MikeMandelHypnosis.com to get on the early bird list because we don't have any kind of formal documentation of what's going to be in that course yet.
Chris, that's just a Cree. I called you Cree. You suddenly become native.
That's nice.
Well, Seneca, I think it's important just to note at this point before we launch into the memory thing, various questions we get from people regarding the graphology that I've been doing for 20-odd years, and I've done it forensically. People say, well, why would I want to study that? Well, look, you'll learn personality inside out. You'll know things about your friends and family that will blow your mind. You'll be able to walk into a restaurant, look at a menu that's written in hand on a chalkboard and know all kinds of stuff about the person. But startlingly, if you do hypnosis or therapy, this will be one of your greatest tools. You get your client to write you a page of their own handwriting and sign it before the appointment. You look at that, you can have it sent to you in a scan, and you'll know so many things that you're dealing with. For example, I just taught our students in the course, if people make letter S's in a certain way, then you are home free. If you do a powerful, in-your-face commanding induction, they will go right into trance with it every time. The writing shows which method to use.
Right, I remember you teaching that, the soft S.
Correct.
Soft-topped S. Okay, so memory, let's finish off where we were originally planning to do podcast 33. We were going to hopefully finish the whole topic on memory. We didn't get around to it. There's two things left on the agenda. The first is the phonetic alphabet, and the second one is, Mike, I want you to teach everybody how they can remember faces, putting names to faces and remembering them quickly. So let's start with the phonetic alphabet.
Right. Well, people typically say, you know, I have a poor memory, or I have a poor memory for numbers. Typically, anyone in reasonably good health has a good memory. You have the capacity to store an estimated 1 million volumes in your lifetime, each one 1,000 pages. So you have the capacity of 1 billion pages of data. We're talking Encyclopedia Britannica size pages, which is quite startling. Now, you have the capacity to remember things. A lot of the time you just don't apply it. You don't use it properly. And if you don't do it properly, as I said to the students on the weekend, if, for instance, when you learn new material, if you don't get sufficient sleep right afterwards, we have said that the REM state won't trigger, which is needed to integrate everything you've just learned. So there's things you can do to make your already cool, powerful memory work even better. And we'll get to the phonetic alphabet, but let's just look at some of the science we didn't really get to. I said before that short-term memory, which is sort of in and out of the brain, is electrical in nature. But a protein molecule is what stores your memory long-term. And it's actually called PKC. It's protein kinase C. And this protein appears at the site of various neurons when you, through your intention, attempt to memorize something. Now, information that you're not intending to memorize will not cause PKC to come to the site. Now, when it is there, it clusters around the site, causes a narrowing of the neuronal gap there, and the memory is then formed in your hippocampus in special cells. And over time, it will migrate to the cerebral cortex, physically migrate. If you review the material, more protein comes to the area, and the connection becomes stronger. If you don't go over the material, you get negative plasticity, and you will start to lose the material. And that's why repetition is so crucial, but not rote repetition, clever repetition. And we're going to show you how to do that.
Now, this came up on the last podcast as well, the term rote, which was the term I was trying to remember, and you brought it up. Tell us what rote means.
What, actually say what the word means?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the interesting thing is I happen to have a Merriam-Webster's dictionary right here in front of me, and Chris, I will read you the definition. It is from Middle English, from Anglo-French, of Germanic origin, and it comes from the 14th century, and it means the use of memory, usually with little intelligence, mechanical and unthinking repetition.
Perfect. Okay, so there you go. That rote, and this is the word that was it was used often in Joshua Foer's book, Moonwalking with Einstein.
And it's used as well in plumbing.
Right,
in the roto-rooter.
Okay. Nice.
We'll edit that out.
Yeah. The idea here is this is like just trying to bang a nail in with a sledgehammer. It is working really hard to memorize something without a lot of intelligence and thought and process.
And intention. I mean, it's back to doing memory with no intention. Without thought means that you're not really focusing your intention behind it. And you remember the Mandel triangle that we looked at in the course was intention, congruence, and confidence.
Right.
And that will apply to this as well. So one of the things people have difficulty memorizing, now we talked about chaining things together in the last podcast, linking things together. We also had the aspect of one gun, two shoe, three tree, and so on. So you have a different memory picture for each of these numbers, and then you just attach the object to it, hanging on a hook on the tree or whatever it is, and then you remember that. You can have multiple lists like that for different purposes. Well, let's say you have two lists of 10, and the second list you want to be able to differentiate from the first list. Well, you could just add another element like water. So you put the second list under water. Or you put the third list, everything is on fire.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
And that just differentiates it. So when you say in the shoe, we have the Architecture of Hypnosis manual that's sitting there. But in the second list of 10, in the shoe, we have your laptop that's sitting there. So we put the laptop in a shoe full of water, and the laptop's soaking wet and doesn't work anymore. And that's how you'll differentiate it as part of the second list. Or it's soaked in gasoline and, the tree is on fire, whatever.
And then all you need to do is remember that water is somehow tied to the second list.
Yeah, so you just make it your second list.
Yeah.
By rote.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm a comic genius. I just wrote that then.
All right.
Well, I wrote it. I said wrote again.
Nice one. All right. So
logical ambiguity.
Let's talk about numbers then, because the phonetic alphabet now.
Numbers tend to be difficult for people to remember because numbers are so abstract. It's really, really difficult. Now, I worked with a guy years ago, and he had an almanac and memorized every country on Earth at the time. I think there were about 156 at the time. There's far more than that now. Despite all our attempts at unity, we're subdividing into smaller and smaller nation states. So eventually you'll have, places so small you just have room to put the flag and nothing else. In fact, I'm thinking of breaking away and becoming my own country now, Chris. So you're going to need a passport to come to my house. But when he would memorize these things, he'd memorize the area in square miles, the population from the latest census, the capital city of every country on Earth.
Like a walking Wikipedia.
Yes, but it took a lot of work. He had to do a lot of review, and he did it all through what's known as the phonetic alphabet. Now, the phonetic alphabet, again, goes back to Bernard Zufall, who I mentioned in the previous podcast. And it seems that pretty well everybody who's doing good memory work today, I know Jerry Lucas did some interesting things. He'd memorized the entire New Testament. And you look at people like Harry Lorraine did a lot of stuff with memory, and I think Kevin Trudeau as well. All of these people, and when I say all, I'm using synecdoche, I mean most people, most people have used the methods of Bernard Zufall. So he sort of quantified it all first, as far as I can tell. But the phonetic alphabet basically attaches a sound, a phoneme, to each number, to each digit. Now, there's only 10 digits. Mm-hmm. So we start with 0 to make it easy. So 0 starts with a Z or Z if you're in Canada or Britain or Australia or South Africa or India or New Zealand or
so Z or
a whole
S.
bunch of other places. Yes. So the hard sound is the Z. The soft sound is the S, the S sound. So S and Z are really the same sound. One is a hard version, the Z sound. One is the S, which is the soft sound. So you just remember that's the one for 0. And the way you can remember is 0 starts with a Z sound. Then you have the number 1. And the number 1 is the letter T. And the hard version would be?
Don't know.
Wait, now. You're right. It started with the D of don't know.
Oh, D.
Yeah.
D, right.
So T is with the teeth. It's T. And D is D. So it's the same sound. One is hard and one is soft. You attach them both to number 1. This is your list you learn by rote and through repetition. Then 2 is, think of a letter N, because a letter N has 2 straight lines in it, 2 vertical lines. So that is N, the N sound. 3 has 3 vertical lines, so that becomes M, the M sound. And then 4 is the R at the end of 4. So 4 is an sound. 5 is an L. If you imagine a policeman holding up his hand with his palm extended to stop you, he is the law. And the law is the L, and he's holding up 5 fingers. So that's how you remember 5 is L.
Ah.
And 6 is both SH, the sh sound,
and CH.
And right? CH, which is the harder version, the ch sound, as in cheese. And then, I can't remember the memory jog for that. It doesn't matter. You'll get it. Just some of them have memory jogs. 7 is a K sound or a G sound. So K or G, soft and hard. 8 is 2 sounds as well. The soft F and the harder V. So again, the same sound. One is the soft version, one is the hard version, which actually gives you variety when you start to use this, having the variety of the 2 for some of them. The 9 is soft is a P, and hard is a B. So again, the same sound, P or B. And finally, we've already gotten to the 0, which is the S or Z sound. So when someone gives you a number, like their phone number or a 4-digit number, you instantly turn it into words. And then you make the words into a picture. And you have it immediately. So if we got something like 3492, so 3492, we know that 3 is an M sound, 4 is an R sound, 9 is a P or B, and 2 is an N. So I look at that and go, Meyer pen. Moyer pen. Paul Moyer, my friend Paul Moyer. Paul Moyer is holding a pen in his hand. It's a big pen. Remember, the bigger you make it, the more ridiculous, and even adding... I heard Barry Farber say, no priest, rabbi, or minister will object if you create bizarrely sexual imagery for these things, but you just say you're not doing it. Nobody will know if you are anyway. So I've now got 3492 becomes Moyer pen. I've got my friend Paul Moyer holding an enormous pen in his hand, smiling at the camera, me. So anytime now you say it was... someone says, oh, what's that number you had to memorize? I go, oh, yeah, Paul Moyer sold the pen, 3492. I've got it instantly. And this is very easy to practice. Every time I see a license plate, I turn the digits into the phonetic alphabet right away, into sounds. You can turn virtually anything into sounds. It's quite remarkable.
Now, the one fine point here is the sound. For example, you have
I thought you said one fine point. I thought you said 154. So right away I went Taylor in my head.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was going to just point out that it's about a sound, not an actual letter. So spelling a word correctly is completely irrelevant here.
Yeah.
So if
these are only consonant sounds anyway.
Yeah, you get F, you could replace that with a PH.
Sure.
In phone, for example.
Yes.
It's a consonant sound, and then you insert your own vowels anywhere in between those consonants to make words.
Yes. And you make words, and you can make sentences, and it's a very, very remarkably easy thing to do. So, Chris, I'll give you one. 60.
Is this are you challenging me? I don't know what this is.
I'm just coming up with it. 6032.
6032.
So
you give me a number?
Yeah, you know.
Okay, so 6, I can't remember which one that is. I don't have the phonetic alphabet memorized.
Okay,
yet.
I thought you did.
No, I don't.
60 is cheese.
Okay.
So then, if we do 6030, we have cheese mice.
Oh, okay.
Or cheese moose would be also work. If we have 6032, we have cheese man or cheese men.
Now, in terms of, let's say you had a number you had to remember and you got cheese mouse. Would you put the picture in context? So let's say it was the address of a cottage up north.
Right.
So
I would see a big mouse sitting on the cottage eating a big chunk of cheese.
And that way the number and the movie or the whatever you're visually remembering is now in context of the cottage, and therefore you've got the address.
Right, and so I'd have to remember it wasn't mouse cheese, it was cheese mouse. So I'd make the cheese the first one. So there's the cottage with a big chunk of cheese. When I open the front door, this wheel of cheese rolls out and hits me, and then mice run out from under the cottage and start eating it. So I build in a sequence that tells me what it is.
The more detail, the more crazy, the better.
Yep, okay. Absolutely.
All right, yeah, I've got to put that.
See, I'm looking at your computer here, and there's a 5-digit number there. It's 44100.
Right.
And right away, I can say Rory dozes. And I know a guy by the name of Rory, and I see him sleeping with the letter Z's coming out of his head. So there's Rory dozing. So Rory dozes gives me 44100 right away.
Right. Which happens to be the recording bit rate for this WAV file.
Well, don't go giving away too much, Chris.
All right, that's standard. Okay, let's talk about faces and names, because this one is fun.
Well, I find they're all fun, actually, Chris, but this is a particularly fun one, children. What you're going to do is when you see someone, you have to imprint their name initially. When my wife met John Grinder for the first time, John looked at her, stared at her intently, and never forgot her name. And his strategy was when the person would say their name, he would repeat it back to them and write it on their forehead. So he'd see it written on the forehead and would then be able to speak it back. Now, the other way is to find out a particular feature of the person's appearance and use that and attach the name to it. Now, an obvious one that I'll use, anytime someone's name is Cameron, I see him holding a camera. And just make that really clear. He's got a big honking, old-fashioned camera around his neck on a strap. Then when I look at him again, I say, oh, yeah, he was wearing something. It was a camera. Oh, hi, Cameron. How are you? Because camera will translate to Cameron right away. Likewise, if you see someone whose name is John, you can put him sitting in the John every time you see him, and you'll remember right away. And Ralph is a really interesting one, because to Ralph is also a colloquialism for to vomit, so you can simply see the person throwing up into their hands and presenting it to you, and you've added action, you made it bizarre, and it'll be easy to remember. You don't have to say to the person, hey, how you doing there? Throw up? Vomit? What the heck was your name? I mean, you've got to code it back again, but it's not hard at all.
Right, simple things. We had a student this weekend named Clark. He's a very tall
Yes,
guy.
and you know how I remembered? I put him in a phone booth with the glasses on.
Yeah.
I made him Clark Kent.
Yeah,
yes.
we turned him into... I put a Superman logo right on his forehead because he's got a good prominent forehead.
Oh, see, I put the big Clark Kent glasses with him standing in a phone booth.
And it doesn't... Yeah, yours is more detailed,
Well, it's
which
just
I
whatever
like.
works
yeah,
for you,
but
right?
that's the point. There is no right and wrong way to do it. It's just
whether or
whatever...
not it's useful.
Yeah, whatever it works for you is useful, and you will remember people's names. I won't tell you the one... It's not podcast friendly, so I won't tell you the one I used this weekend.
Okay, now you got us all intrigued.
Oh, I'll have to save that for another podcast.
Yeah, or just edit it out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but the problem is, we've said edit it out so many times now, joking, that when we go through real edits, you're going to leave stuff in that has no business being there. See, so much for memory.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about with regards to memory?
I just want to emphasize that the brighter the color you make things, the more storyline you attach to it, the easier it is to remember. It's like, what's his name? Barry Farber taught us a class, and he said... if you have to remember whether something, if you're learning a foreign language, and we run into something like French, which has masculine and feminine words, and German has neuter as well. So a lobster, das Hummer, is a neutral word.
A neutered
lobster, which is actually interesting because that's pretty well where I'm going with this, Chris. You are being prescient. If you have a train and you want to remember in French, le train is going to be a masculine word. He says put the proper genitals on the train.
Oh, that's horrible.
Well, it is, but you never forget.
But it works,
never forget. The problem is, I'm warped for life, and every time I see a train now, I go, yuck.
What if you see a bullet train?
Well, there you go. We'll edit that one out for sure.
Horrible.
So, these are all kinds of tricks, but you've got to make it a clear, vivid picture. The brighter you make it, the more bizarre, adding motion, all of these things will help. If you want to remember that Ukrainian, the word for potato is krompier, which it is, all you do is you see, a submarine arriving at a pier made of chrome delivering potatoes secretly, and potatoes coming into the chrome pier. So you got krompier right away. And so that's Barry Farber's stuff. You're just attaching the sound to what the word is. And it's really easy to do.
And this all falls back to something that we talked about on the last podcast, which is that the brain is a pattern recognition, pattern matching.
Well, not just pattern
system,
matching.
Right?
The brain is a self-organizing system. It is always editing and always taking new information in, and through your entire neurology is dropping it into place, and then using the protein kinase C to solidify some of these memories and make them permanent. Memory is only things you've learned that you want to retain.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just things you want to retain. And when you do something repeatedly, you'll have it forever. It's, when I learned a number of poems, I learned some Lord Byron. And when I was a kid in public school, for memory work, other kids were saying, stupid little limericks and that. No, not me. I did a Stanley Holloway poem, Sam the Saxon, which is so long and complex. I think we probably ended a podcast with it.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I've been able to say that since I was 7 or 8 years old flawlessly. And the reason why was my father had somehow taken the time to learn this poem, and I had just heard it every time we'd go camping or on vacation to, Prince Edward Island or something. It shows you how often we went camping, which was a nightmare, until I could just recite it with him as well. I've got it permanently.
Wow. So, memory is about things you want to remember, and unfortunately sometimes
memory is about things you learn that you wish to retain.
Well, and sometimes it's things that you retain that you don't want to retain anymore, in which case we can teach you all about amnesia.
Yeah, we certainly can. We can show you how to fragment memories. Remember, you really don't remember anything. Every time you access a memory, you are editing it, which is why my method of forensic hypnosis, which I've used in murder cases and poisoning and sex offenses and robberies, armed robberies, all sorts of things, with a lot of police forces and police services, the method cannot cause false memory syndrome, because even interviewing the subject will start to change the memory.
All right. So with that, let's move on to some Q&A. We have
wait, before we do, I want to do a plug
All right.
for a really cool book. There's,
yes.
as you know, there's some really good hypnosis trainers that I respect out there. Igor Ledachowski, have I said it right?
I think so.
Well, you're Polish, aren't you?
Ledachowski,
You're a heritage? Well, you tell me if I'm saying right.
Ledachowski.
Anyway, Igor, excellent hypnosis trainer. I recommend his courses. He's a man who knows his stuff inside out, and he's one of the people I really have a respect for. If you're looking to do certain types of hypnosis, I recommend you go and study with him. But the other one I really, really like is Anthony Jacquin. Now, I'm saying the British pronunciation, Anthony, which I suspect is how he pronounces it, being a Brit. Anthony is a really, really interesting hypnotist, and I've looked at a bunch of his stuff online, and he's he knows his stuff inside out. He's extremely congruent and confident. And I know his dad's a hypnotist too. And the thing I really like about his materials is I wound up purchasing his book. You know, Chris, I keep up on what everybody else is doing. And, you know, I don't order things anonymously or anything.
Yes.
I mean, I just tell people I buy your stuff. And if I like it, I'll give you a plug for it. And his book, Reality is Plastic, ! Is a really cool book. In fact, it's not a big book, but it is very pithy. It's got solid content, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think he's thought this out very, very well. If you want to up your hypnosis skills, regardless of what you're doing, then pick up Anthony Jacquin's book, Reality is Plastic. You can buy it online, and he gives some wonderful examples of the time he hypnotized the greengrocer in the street and got the guy to give him a whole bag full of cucumbers, which is circulated on YouTube a lot. But he graciously explains how he set that whole thing up with his street hypnosis and managed to convince a waiter he was a barman, he was Denzel Washington, and so on. But he's gracious and explains. He doesn't make it sound like, oh, I just walked in and waved my hand and this happened. He shows the setup and that, and he gives really, really solid material. So I'm telling you, go buy his book, buy his stuff. I think the head hackers with Anthony Jacquin are doing some excellent work in pushing the limits, the boundaries of what hypnosis is. So they are also people I recommend.
I'm glad to hear you say that they explain it in detail, because a lot of the times people will watch the YouTube video and go, you know, oh, wow,
it looks
so easy.
Yes.
And the setup's missing. We talked about this in class, too. Somebody asked about some of the mentalism tricks that another guy does.
Yeah, they leave the setups out.
Yeah.
This is a very well-known mentalist who does really cool stuff, really good stuff. But what you see on the video is not necessarily the way it happened. Yes, you might see him walk up to someone and do this, that, and the other, and this amazing thing happens. What you've not seen is the 60 times it didn't work first, with different people. And there are always setups, and the explanations are not always accurate. Not that I'm taking anything from the person by saying that, because it's supposed to be entertainment, first and foremost, and it is. I saw one of them doing a particular demonstration with cards, and he was supposedly estimating. It was the first time I saw him. I was on a plane somewhere and saw it on a video, and I realized right away, no, he's doing a breather crimp. And a breather crimp was brought into the magical fraternity by Canadian magician Di Vernon years ago, taken from the gambling group. And he took professional gamblers' techniques and brought them out for magicians. But so just be a little skeptical of what you see on TV, because everything isn't quite the way it seems. The whole point is to entertain you. Nevertheless, there's some really cool stuff out there. So anyway, let's just back up again. Igor's stuff, highly recommend it. It's solid. He does a great job. He knows his stuff inside
out.
Conversational hypnosis. He's got the market cornered, and rightly so. He's put the time in. He's got some good decks of cards out there that you can use to learn these things, like his street hypnosis deck, I believe he did. And also Anthony Jacquin's book, Reality is Plastic, is really good. The head hackers do great stuff. And I want to also mention Jamie Smart again, who did the salad cards that you can buy through your through iTunes, and just Google salad cards and you'll learn NLP coaching cards and Ericksonian hypnosis cards, and they're very reasonably priced. And he's another guy, just seems like a solid teacher, knows his stuff really well. I just think all the ones I mentioned, I would recommend. If I haven't mentioned them, there's probably a reason why. Like the one horrible video, Chris.
Oh, we can't even talk about that.
We can't even talk about it, but there's one video out there by someone who has this reputation of being such an amazing hypnosis instructor, and I find his stuff just offensive. He virtually manhandles this poor woman and throws her around and just joking about it the whole time. I think he's got his crotch pressed against her back.
Pretty much.
Of this.
Yeah.
It's like, if that was me, man, I would have neck cranked him 6 ways to next Tuesday.
Well, we could spend a lot of time on that, but we won't.
He's trying to get me off the topic, because he's the Enneagram 9 who wants everyone to be happy, and I'm the 8 who wants to neck crank him.
I don't blame you in this case, though. That video, I sent it to you.
He's agreeing with me because he's an Enneagram 9?
Freaking horrible. Yeah, I am. Okay, let's move on. I want to do a couple of Q&A questions before we end this podcast. So,
all right.
Here's some that I've been saving up for a while, because we just haven't had a lot of time to add Q&A in. One guy, I'm actually not going to mention the name of him in this particular case, because he asked an interesting question that I suppose he probably doesn't want his boss to hear. But he had emailed in saying, look, I'm interested in taking a week off to take your course, but if I tell my boss that this is what I'm planning on doing, he won't go for it. You know, he's not going to think that it's a good reason. Of course, I recommend that he doesn't actually explain why he's taking the week off. It's not his boss's business. But what is a good way to handle it when you want to take a week off to take some training and you have a
simple.
boss who wants to know all the details about your life?
Simple. Unless the boss is paying for it, in which case you really need to be upfront with him.
Of course.
But if not, if it's your life and we think you would benefit to come and study with us anyway, I would sell it, young man, to your boss. As you're coming to Toronto, you're going to study an intensive at the University of Toronto for 1 week in advanced communication skills, interpersonal and intrapersonal.
Yep, and if you don't want to do that, then just say that you are taking personal education time.
Tell them you're being treated for a drinking problem.
That's right. The same fellow also asked the question, is it okay if your mind wanders during hypnosis?
Oh, good grief, yes. In fact, the part of your mind that's wandering is the conscious mind, and that's fine. I mean, I've seen Richard Mandel work where he tells the person, you know, let your brain go off, your conscious mind go and play around a golf, because that's what the guy loved. And he said, I'll just shut this door behind you and you won't hear anything we're saying.
Oh, that's awesome.
The guy goes back, he's played like 12 holes of golf and he's had all his problems fixed at the same time.
Beautiful. Okay, next one is a content-free therapy question from Emily. My question is, or she writes, how does a therapist in question make sure that the patient is dealing with the issues in the right way, i.e. in a content-free therapy context? And she goes on to say, I mean, in the privacy of one's own mind, anything could happen. How does the therapist keep tabs on what's happening, but still respect the privacy?
Well, Emily, that's an excellent question. And very often I've worked with clients, even on Skype, who do not wish to disclose things. Although mostly nowadays I'm working with Skype with clients who want to do generative change. They want to make things better. They're not just fixing a problem. They want to do better in sales or whatever it is. And those are the things I like working with most, helping people do better. But often somebody will have a problem they do not wish to discuss because it could be embarrassing or, you know, have other people involved they don't want to mention or so on. Now, there are therapies for dealing with that. I created Art Gallery a number of years ago just for that particular purpose. But the bottom line is, you want to be congruent working with the person, and you want to calibrate them. Calibrate in advance, and you'll see the problematic states, and ensure after the fact that when you deal with the person that you are not seeing any artifact of that problem state. And then you can just check, future pace it. And when you go into that situation next time, how are you going to feel? What will happen? And if you're still seeing some sort of distress or artifacts of it, you still got work to do. Do work with clean states. Let your trances be trances, your waking states be waking states. Keep them separate from each other, and you will have no difficulty determining when you fixed it and when you haven't, because you can ask them.
All right, I think that's it for the Q&A mailbag today. We have an empowering question for the end of the podcast before we head into the metaphor?
We do. Okay, here's our empowering question today. Let this resonate with you. And as usual, I will say it more than once. The question is, what is the one thing you are going to do this year that will make a huge positive difference in your life? And how will you begin this process today? I'll ask you again. What is the one thing you are going to do this year that will make a huge positive difference in your life? And how will you begin the process today? Well, we're going to do things a little differently now. Our closing metaphor is going to come from the immortal, the immaterial, the lovely, the funny, the fit. Chris Thompson himself has a closing metaphor. Chris, take it away.
Okay, this is the story about high school English. When I was a young boy in grade 8, so I would have been about 13 years old, living in Ottawa, I had developed a real anxiety about entering high school. Not because I thought the material would be particularly challenging or anything like that, but I was worried specifically about English literature. I was not comfortable with the idea that I would have to read Shakespearean plays and try to understand these plays that were written in some horrible version of English that I didn't understand or didn't think I would understand. It turned out to be true. I didn't understand it. And I was even more worried about having to write essays explaining the meaning of these plays that I wouldn't have even understood in the first place. So keep in mind that entering high school, being in grade 8, I was a math and a science geek. I loved math and science. These were subjects that came naturally to me. My father was an engineer, and I've just always had this interest in learning math and science and understanding the world. And I remember one night, before my grade 8 science exam, I was sitting in the living room of our family home in Ottawa with my dad. My dad was watching TV, and I was sort of watching TV, but sort of flipping through my science notebook, and I had the exam the next day, and after about 5 minutes, I interrupted my dad, and I said, Dad, I don't really feel like studying for this exam. I'm bored. I already understand the topic. I just don't see the point. And, he said something to me that I remember very clearly. He said, if you're sure you know the material, there's no need to waste time on it. Learn something else. And funny thing is, I was the only kid the next day who ended up getting 100% on the exam because it was just something that always came easily to me and it was fun for me. So it never felt like studying. Now, English, not so much. I would get an essay question from a teacher in English class, and the question would be something like, was Charlie justified in seeking revenge on Adam in whatever the story was that we were reading? And, me being the logical type, I would see that question and I would write down yes, or I would write down no. The teacher would, of course, give me a failing grade because I didn't explain the answer. And I would go up to the teacher and say, well, why are you giving me a failing grade? And they would tell me, well, you didn't explain your answer. I'd say, well, you didn't ask for an explanation. You asked a yes or a no question, and I gave you a yes or a no answer. If you want better answers, ask better questions. Now, of course, that didn't go over very well with the teachers. Now, inside their head, they knew I was right. They knew they had asked the wrong question, but it wasn't appropriate or acceptable for a teacher who's supposed to be a professional at communicating to admit that, he or she had asked a horribly wrong question. So, entering high school, I did end up struggling with Shakespeare, as I alluded to, and of course, not only Shakespeare, the other books that I was forced to read as part of the curriculum. I hated having someone else dictate to me what I had to read, and I ended up just getting by in English class. I never got great grades, but I knew I had to just struggle along and get the job done, which I ended up doing. Now, all of that changed, though, and affected me greatly in grade 11, where I had this wonderful teacher named Mr. Anderson, and he taught an elective class called English Writing. Now, rather than English literature, this class was about getting your message out on paper. It was a class in writing, and I took it as an elective. Might sound interesting to hear me say that I took an elective in English, considering I didn't enjoy English. Well, I needed 5 English credits to graduate high school. That was the curriculum standard in Ontario at the time. And I was planning on doing high school in 4 years, as were most of my science and math geek friends at the time. So obviously, to finish high school in 4 years and get 5 English credits, that meant having to take 2 English courses in 1 year. And grade 11 was that year. So I took the literature class and the elective English writing class. Now, what I discovered in English writing class is that I love to write. You see, I was permitted or even encouraged for the first time to write about things that interested me rather than write about topics I had absolutely no interest in whatsoever. And I went on, because of this class and because of this teacher, Mr. Anderson, to become quite a good writer. And I credit all to Mr. Anderson because he once told the class, listen, you'll do a lot of writing in life. Stories, reports, whatever it is, writing is life. And if you don't like the story you're writing, stop writing it. Then start writing something you'll actually enjoy. And this was probably the best advice I'd ever gotten from a high school teacher. So if you're out there, Mr. Anderson, I want to tell you that your message resonated with me. I've been writing ever since. I have written plenty of things that I stopped writing because I wasn't enjoying it. And I've always remembered that if I wasn't enjoying something I was writing, I would just throw away the sheet of paper and start fresh and write something that I would actually enjoy.
Thank you for listening. This is Dr. Mike Mandel. That was Chris Thompson on the metaphor. And you have been listening to Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel and Chris Thompson. Please stay tuned for our ending, which will be glanative as always. This has been podcast number 34. Listen for 35 coming soon to a set of headphones near you. That was a brilliant line, wasn't it? Let's end it.
Portions of the preceding podcast have been paid for in part by solicited contributions from the Society of Canadian Lawyers in defense of wrongfully accused, prosecuted, and convicted frotaging birthday party clowns and magicians currently on death row.